They called it Invincible. They painted it with superlatives and rolled it out like a miracle weapon. A steel talisman that would swing the war by sheer reputation. But when Russia finally unleashed its T-90M main battle tanks near Pokrovsk, the result wasn't shock and awe. It was shock and ash. In less than a day, that aura of invincibility went up in smoke, and Ukraine's defenders turned the world's best tank into a case study in why paper specs don't win modern wars. Here's the setup. For nearly a year, Moscow hoarded its newest T-90Ms, keeping them off the front lines while older T-72s, T-80s, and museum pieces absorbed the punishment. The logic was brutal but simple. Let the Soviet-era herd burn through Ukrainian ammo, then send in the thoroughbreds to finish the job. When the moment came, the target was a logistical prize, Pokrovsk, and the approach ran through the village of Shakhove, a small anchor in the defensive geometry north of the city. The plan: roll in a spearhead of 36 tanks, plenty of T-90Ms among them, with armoured fighting vehicles, and, in a flourish only Russian planners could love, 40 motorcycle troops buzzing ahead to draw fire. Nothing says stealth like two-stroke engines and dust clouds. Even on paper, the bet looked plausible. Russia had spent months telling the world and itself that this tank was different. Vladimir Putin said it out loud in June 2023. The T-90M is the world's best tank.
Т-90 Прорыв лучший танк в мире. Вот сейчас можно сказать, что Т-90 Прорыв лучший танк в мире. Он как только на позицию выходит.
No chance is left for anyone or anything. You could almost hear the turret flexing. And the spec sheet did its part. A 125mm 2A46 M4 smoothbore capable of firing standard rounds and laser beam riding anti-tank missiles. A listed reach of roughly 4,000 meters for gun-launched missiles. A PKT coaxial machine gun for chewing through infantry. A claimed top speed north of 60 km per hour and range of more than 500 km with field refueling. Wrap it in relict explosive reactive armor, drape QNet protection over the hull and rear, and you've got a tank that looks menacing in Brochure lighting. On the battlefield though, specs are promises. The enemy gets to grade the test. Ukraine did exactly that on October 9th. Shakhove was no soft target. It held the 225th Assault Regiment and elements of the 1st Azov Corps, units that spent the summer ripping back settlements around Pokrovsk and building a defense meant to catch and punish any mechanized lunge. When the Russian assault began, it didn't so much advance as arrive in waves. First the motorcyclists, then the armor columns, each wave hoping the previous one had drained Ukrainian magazines and attention spans. Instead, the defenders answered with mines, drones, and artillery. The lead shattered, the momentum evaporated, and Russia's punctured spear retreated toward Volodymyrivka, only to be hunted through the night by bomber drones that picked at survivors until there were none left to pick. The scoreline was ugly. 3 tanks gone, 16 armored fighting vehicles wrecked, 41 motorcycles reduced to scrap, 2 more light vehicles toasted for good measure. On the human side, the 1st Azov Corps counted 107 irreversible losses, dead, and 51 medical. If the assault included Russia's vaunted Marines rushed into the area earlier in response to Ukraine's Azov deployment, those were some of the better trained troops in the Kremlin's arsenal. It didn't matter. When your best tank meets a battlefield designed for drones, mines, and precision artillery, you don't get a duel. You get a demonstration. This was the year in the making punch Putin had saved. Unleash the T-90M to break the stalemate, capture Shakhove, and turn Pokrovsk into the next prize. It lasted less than a day. There's a cruel symmetry in that. For months, Russia stockpiled the tank it bragged about. When it finally arrived, the war had moved on. Ukraine had already built the answer key. Let's talk about the tank itself, because the T-90M isn't a cartoon villain. It's a significant evolution of a 1990s design. But that lineage is the tell. The T-90 family began production in 1994, a 3-decade arc in which the world's killing tech changed faster than its armor did. The T-90M borrowed its bones and some bad habits from earlier Soviet designs. it still relies on a carousel autoloader that keeps ammunition dangerously close to the crew without a proper partition. In an era of top-attack munitions and precision drones, that's like storing fireworks under your stovetop. A clean hit from above can turn a tank into a blast furnace. Russia doesn't call it a design flaw. Ukraine calls it a target. Worse, battlefield evidence has exposed gremlins that no glossy brochure mentions. Forbes christened one of them spinning turret syndrome, a condition where after certain strikes, the T-90M's turret spins uncontrollably, turning a multi-million-dollar weapon into the world's most dangerous fidget spinner. Ukraine has forced this failure in multiple engagements, by FPV drones in December 2023, by combined hits again in May 2024, and even in a January 2024 fight where M2 Bradleys, on paper outmatched, helped disable a T-90M because the turret decided to go carousel mode. You can have all the armor in the world. If your turret decides to dance, your gun isn't doing the talking. And remember, the Kremlin didn't just hype the T-90M, it built a doctrine around it. This is the tank that was supposed to exploit breaches and crack fortified lines. The attack near Shakhove looked like a rehearsal straight from a Soviet playbook. Massed armor supporting infantry, momentum as armor. But modern defenders write in a different language. They funnel columns into pre-sighted kill zones with mines. They peel back the fog with drones. They queue artillery in seconds, not minutes. They finish at night with bombers that loiter on propellers and camera feeds. At each step, the T-90M's protections, relict tiles, cage kits, smoke, bump into threats they weren't built to solve. You can't detonate your way out of a top attack when the strike arrives vertically at supersonic speed. You can't jam a loitering munition that's following a human with a joystick and a live video feed. You can only hope to survive the first hit and back out before the second finds you. On October 9th, there was no backing out. If you're looking for a punchline that hurts, take the production numbers. Moscow's propagandists trumpet mass production, and by Russia's wartime standards, they aren't lying. Analysts estimate 60 to 70 T-90Ms built in 2022, 140 to 180 in 2022-2023, and roughly 280 to 300 in 2024. That's the good news. The bad news? Ukraine claims to have destroyed more than 11,000 Russian tanks since the full-scale invasion began. Even if you debate the precise figure, you can't debate the math of replacement. A few hundred new tanks per year don't offset a battlefield where 3 tanks can vanish before lunchtime at Shakhove. A tenth of the annual losses is not a production miracle. It's a slow bleed with a shiny bandage. Internationally, the tank's reputation has already taken friendly fire. India was supposed to be the marquee customer, placing a large order in 2019. Then came performance complaints, public embarrassment at tank biathlons where T-90s malfunctioned, and a turn toward rebuilding or replacing rather than doubling down. None of that happened because of Ukrainian drones. That was before the current war. In other words, the world's best tank struggled in peacetime trials and parades long before it had to face a real enemy. That's not a great omen for a machine now tasked with outperforming quadcopters and trench-borne ingenuity. Meanwhile, back home, the PR campaign never sleeps. Rostec's executives lined up in May 2025 to declare that not just the T-90M, but the refurbished T-72B3M and T-80BVM are the world's best serial-produced tanks. If that sentence makes you tilt your head, putting best and T-72 in the same thought after the last 3 years, you aren't alone. Put kindly, it's motivational speaking for a domestic audience. Put honestly, it's a coping mechanism for a war that keeps turning Russian armor into smoking craters and viral videos. So why did the assault fail, beyond the easy memes and morale? Because modern mechanized warfare is an ecosystem, not a duel. The T-90M is a component, and a vulnerable one, in a kill web that Ukraine has learned to orchestrate. The Russians approached Shakhove with the logic of armor: shock, speed, mass. The Ukrainians answered with the logic of the 2020s: sensors, saturation, precision. Mines set the table. Drones provided the eyes and initial stabs. Artillery did the heavy lifting, and night drones closed the account. Armor is supposed to compress time and space. A drone swarm stretches time for the attacker. forcing hesitation, creating traffic jams, and inviting exactly the sort of artillery catastrophes we saw. The physics of steel versus explosives didn't change on October 9th. The choreography did.
There's a brutal, almost comic detail in that choreography. 40 motorcycles in the lead to soak up ammunition. It reads like a parody of combined arms. In practice, it was a calamity. If the goal was to burn through Ukrainian magazines, drones don't care. If the goal was to spook defenders into shooting early, mines don't care. The motorcycles died for momentum that never arrived. If you're planning to invade the 21st century, at least turn off the two-stroke. A quick reality check on the supposed invulnerability. Even when the T-90M absorbs a hit and keeps rolling, the follow-on threats are designed to kill persistence. FPV drones adjust and strike weak spots. Top attack warheads ignore your sloped nose and chew into your roof. And if the turret decides to spin, the crew has two options: bail out or ride a merry-go-round towards an expensive funeral. Somewhere in the design bureau, a slide probably once read, "Increased survivability." On the front line, that translates to increased evacuation drills.
If you zoom out, the lesson is bigger than one bad day at Shakhove. It's that a tank designed in a different era is now being combat tested in real time against a layered defense the Soviets never imagined. In 1994, no one was gaming out $500 drones flying into vision blocks, or company-level artillery calling precision fires off quadcopter video feeds, or militia-built bombers loitering over retreat routes to harvest stragglers after dark. The T-90M's designers did what designers do: update armor, tweak fire control, bolt on reactive plates, add active countermeasures. Ukraine's defenders did what modern defenders must: exploit angles armor can't cover, with weapons armor can't easily defeat. Guided by eyes, armor can't blind. That mismatch is why a year of Russian stockpiling ended in a one-day rout. And yet, Moscow is likely to keep sending T-90Ms. Mass production is a slogan that sounds good in a factory video package. It sounds less convincing when a single Ukrainian artillery mission writes off a platoon in 30 seconds. Russia will argue that quantity has a quality all its own. Ukraine will reply, politely, that quality applied at the right moment beats quantity stuck in a minefield. In that dialogue, the T-90M is not the author, it's the subject.
Let's be fair, the tank is not dead. It still dominates where skies are friendly, and infantry is coordinated. But in this war, the sky belongs to whoever brought more batteries and better antennas. A tank without air cover is a coffin with a cannon. That sentence used to be hyperbole. Now it's a GoPro genre. And the T-90M, for all its upgrades, still drags a design DNA that makes bad outcomes worse. Carousel autoloaders were clever engineering for a different threat model. Today, they're just a shortcut from hit to catastrophic. The world's best tank can't be the world's best if it turns one weak spot into a kill switch. If you want a lighter note in all this, consider the advertising. The T-90M arrived with swagger, and Kremlin TV obliged with slow-mo footage and orchestral crescendos. Then October 9th happened, and the soundtrack changed to the whine of FPV motors and the dull crack of artillery. Somewhere, a producer had to swap a triumphant brass section for a minor key. War is a ruthless editor. If your hardware can't pass the footage test, no voiceover can save it. There's also the international credibility problem. When a weapon underperforms in a high-visibility conflict, customers watch. India's souring on T-90 variants predates the current war, and others will be taking notes. A tank that malfunctions at a biathlon isn't doomed. A tank that malfunctions at a biathlon and then spins its turret in combat is a procurement cautionary tale. In a world where Western armor arrives with active protection and separate ammo compartments, it's hard to sell a carousel as a feature and not a liability. We should talk numbers, because they matter beyond the headlines. Ukraine's government claims over 11,000 Russian tanks destroyed as of mid-October. Argue methodology if you like, but the direction is unmistakable. This war eats armor faster than Russia can build its newest models. Even if Moscow somehow doubled T-90M output, the replacement curve would lag the destruction curve. That's not a production line. That's a treadmill set to sprint. And it's why saving your best for a decisive blow was always a gamble.
By the time the tanks rolled, the battlefield had learned how to kill them.
So, what does Shakhove teach? First, that technology and doctrine are a pair, and you can't modernize one without the other. Massed armor without air dominance is nostalgia. Second, that survivability in 2025 is about angles and sensors, not just thickness. Third, that calling your tank Invincible is the fastest way to make every drone pilot within 50 kilometers treat it like a personal challenge. And finally, that the psychology of the battlefield has flipped. Tanks used to impose fear by presence. Now they invite attention by price tag. If you're a Ukrainian unit staring at a T-90M, you aren't thinking, we can't kill that. You're thinking, how many drones will it take? That's a terrible place for a prestige platform to live. As for the men inside, they deserve a better design and a better plan. No crew wants to discover, mid-fight, that a quirk in the turret drive will spin them into uselessness. No commander wants to be told that the route forward is lined with mines, the sky with drones, and the fallback road with bomber loitering. The tank is supposed to impose control. In this war, it too often surrenders it. In a different universe, maybe the T-90M arrives on a battlefield shaped for it. Open country, strong air defense cover, suppression of enemy drones, combined arms timing that lands like a hammer. In hours, it arrived at Shakhove, into a chessboard rigged for drones and artillery, against defenders who've had 2 years to rehearse this exact scene. The outcome wasn't inevitable, but it was predictable. The best tank in the world met the best lesson of the war. If you don't adapt, you get adapted. Which leaves one last question. If a tank that claims supremacy can be neutralized by a network of cheap sensors, smart munitions, and disciplined infantry, what does the future of armored warfare look like? Maybe it's heavier lids and smarter brains. Maybe it's fewer giants and more teams of smaller, faster, unmanned killers. Or maybe it's the old truth in a new wrapper. The winner isn't the side with the biggest machine. It's the side with the better plan for the machines it has. On October 9th, Ukraine had that plan. Russia had the T-90M. And in less than a day, reality graded the test. The result wasn't close.